Getting a Life was first thought of in 2007, and it was because the Minister for Social Services then, who was Ivan Lewis, became very frustrated because he kept hearing people and their families talking about how transition planning wasn't working. Ivan talked to his colleagues, ministers in other departments, and they agreed together to set up Getting a Life in order to find out why young people with learning disabilities weren't leaving school and or college and getting jobs and full lives, and then to tell the government what needs to change. Local areas were asked to put in bids to become Getting a Life sites. So it was for local authorities, children and adult services, but also to work with all of the other people, all of the other services in the system who have got any kind of role or responsibility around supporting young people with learning disabilities into adulthood. In each of the areas, we're working with a project team, and the project team is made up of, we try to make sure it's senior people from each of the services that have any responsibility. So we've got children's services, adult social care services, adult services, the Learning and Skills Council, colleges and schools, Job Centre Plus, and supported employment services, and most importantly, people with learning disabilities and family carers. What our task is to help those project teams to work out how they're going to make sure that they have a journey into adulthood that makes sure that young people with learning disabilities get jobs, the focus is jobs, but also plan for the lives that they want in terms of housing and friendships and social lives and all the other things that are important. And we're working with 30 young people and families in each site so that we make sure that we do things differently, because often people from services sit around the table and have conversations and write protocols and strategies and all sorts of things. But if it isn't the kind of stuff that we know from young people and families needs to happen, we don't make the right changes. Working with the sites, we quickly came up with what we want to see differently by March 2011. And the first thing is that we want to be using money better. I think several times this morning people have been talking about there is money in the system, we're not using it well. And one of the things we've got to try and do is use the money better. There's a lot of money available that at the moment people with learning disabilities are not getting their fair share of, and that's a lot of the, you heard Jonathan Shaw talking about access to work money and work step and work prep and all those funding streams. So what we're doing in the Getting a Life sites is seeing if we can be really brave and adventurous and all those kinds of things and use that money in order to support people get jobs. We want to see the education system change so that we make sure that if people do go on to education after 19, or perhaps we even start thinking about whether people leave school at 16 and go to further education, or even go to work and then have training on the job. For individuals, these are the outcomes that we want to see, and this is something that came out of our early work with each of the sites. So we want to be able to show by the end of this work what it takes for young people with learning disabilities to leave school and college and have jobs. We want to make sure that through the transition phase from when young people are 13 and 14, they actually know what's possible and they get information about housing choices. They need to be able to start thinking about the future. Families need to be thinking about the future, so young people need the information about housing options. We need to be better at supporting young people through transition around friendships and relationships and social lives. And we want people to really be in control of that planning process. So they're the main outcomes from the Getting a Life programme. We want to see people working better together. I think we've been talking about this for many, many years. Sometimes it's called multi-agency working, sometimes it's called inter-agency working, and sometimes it's called partnership working. And we're really, really, really bad at it, because we have separate organisations with separate laws and legislation and rules, and we have different funding streams, and however much we talk about it, we don't do it very well. And one of the reasons that we insisted on having project teams in each of our areas is that we need those people to all be in the room together and really get their heads around what is it that isn't working and what do we need to do differently together. And that is a challenge in our sites, because people are not used to working like that. We are reporting to the government, so we report to ministers and senior civil servants, and the most important job that Nicola and I do is to talk to those people and tell them what the problems are and what needs to change in top policy, at the top policy level. We still find that people don't really know what person-centred means, and person-centred planning was introduced with Valuing People White Paper in 2001, and we still hear people everywhere saying, we do person-centred planning, or we are person-centred, and they're not. And so it's really important that when we're talking about work, we keep emphasising that person-centred means finding out what is important to that person and then supporting them to get their dreams, wishes, and the kind of life that they want. There are very low expectations and aspirations in the whole system for young people learning disabilities. Now that's jargon, and what that means is that there seems to be, throughout services, and a lot of you would probably say throughout society, people are not expected to have full lives. People are not expected to have friends and relationships and full lives and jobs. That is just not what we think we're doing. And we've had quite a fight with, in all of our sites, particularly with schools. There is discrimination in the system, and the two examples that we use of this are the young people with learning disabilities don't get work experience when everyone else does, and that they really don't have choice at college, whereas most people can kind of do a course at college that is about their interests and what they want to do when they leave. Young people with learning disabilities really are only offered special courses for people with learning difficulties. And people are not using person-centred approaches throughout the system. And one of the sad things is that what we're finding is with the individual budget programme, the personalisation programme, we're finding that people are not bringing together person-centred planning, the work around personalisation, and thinking about employment. So it's one of the things we're working very hard on the sites to try and bring that to be. And most importantly, in terms of today and valuing employment now, there is very little, if any, support for young people around getting jobs. And I think what we found is that everybody, every part of the system thinks it's someone else's responsibility. So often it's like, isn't that what connections are supposed to do? And then you get someone else saying, but that's to do with supported employment and the job centre and that. So the reality is that for young people with learning disabilities, nobody takes responsibility for getting them a job, for the majority, and yet everybody thinks it's someone else's responsibility. So that's a really important piece of learning. And then finally, just to come back to this issue of working with young people and their families, it is the most important and exciting thing we're doing. And I think it's probably the most, where we will learn most, because certainly when we meet young people and their families, they tell us, the young people tell us what jobs they want, and families are very, very positive about their sons and daughters getting work, and we're often told that families have very low expectations as well as the rest of the system, and I think our conclusion is that people don't have low expectations about their sons and daughters. What they have is a low expectation that the system can deliver. And so people just don't believe that the system can support their daughters and sons into adulthood with the lives that they want.